even deeper stretch. So we've gone from simply stretching our lats by stretching our arms overhead to an optimal biomechanical strategy that lengthens the lats from our hand position all the way to creating the maximum curve from arm to spine. This process works pretty much anywhere, so you can determine which exercises are actually worth your time. But we don't just want to be static passive stretching. The lats, pecs, subscap, and so on can all be targeted through a wide range of mobility and flexibility training methods, such as contract relax, isometrics, loaded stretching, and many more. So if one method doesn't work for you, there are many ways to attack it. The beauty of assessing properly is you can see if your training is working. If you reassess and there's little to no progress, you can then look at different training methods along the spectrum of passive to active training. Everyone is an individual. It's about using this information to find the method that will give you the fastest and most sustainable progress. This shoulder assessment is part of the process for my students pursuing the handstand. Increased shoulder flexion with the strength to use it makes more complex skills like shape changing, pressing, and one-arm handstands more efficient. We've taught well over 100 people to handstand, and over at least 50 plus of these amazing individuals to over a minute hold. Part of the handstand toolkit involves teaching our students how to address any shoulder dysfunctions so that they can excel in their practice. So far, we've looked at the muscles being stretched, but there's also the muscles responsible for pulling us into an overhead position. Muscles like the anterior deltoid, coracobrachialis, and even the long head of the biceps brachii. They need the strength in their shortened positions to be able to lift our arm. Training your ability to lift into your end range against gravity builds the active flexibility we need to use it in our practice. When looking at shoulder flexibility, upper back flexibility can become a hot topic. Your thoracic spine is the middle segment of your spine along your upper back. By extending your thoracic, you can create what seems like more shoulder range of motion, but the actual angle at the shoulder hasn't changed. Watch the angle as I extend my back. It may appear that I've gained more range, but the angle at the shoulder has actually remained the same. Thoracic extension can be useful in fields such as Olympic weightlifting or bridge work, but it is not strictly necessary for full shoulder flexion range of motion. In fact, if you look at hand balancing or a full 180-degree Leahy test, you'll notice that the thoracic is actually flexing. It's doing the opposite motion to what you might expect by rounding and not arching. Keep this in mind during your shoulder training. There is a time and place for thoracic extension. I do use it in my approach to training. However, I believe there has been a slight overemphasis on its role in shoulder mechanics by some. Let's continue our journey of improving your overhead performance. It's important to understand how our bones are moving underneath. When lifting our arms overhead, all four of the shoulder joints must work together. You can test this. Place one hand on your opposite shoulder. Without letting your scapula lift any higher, raise your arm. For me, I get about this far. We've essentially created a bony block or an impingement at the shoulder. Now release the hand and allow the scapula to lift. See how much further you can go. This is because the scapula must also upwardly rotate as you lift your arm, and this is known as scapulohumeral rhythm. Already we can see how the movement of your scapula is essential in achieving full range of motion. For most of you, there will have been no pain with this impingement that you just created, as impingements can occur with or without pain. Here, I'm referring to an impingement limiting a range of motion and not a cause of shoulder pain. In fact, impingements reducing the space under the acromion often play a small, if any, part in shoulder pain. So much so, the medical and rehab communities are moving away from the term shoulder impingement syndrome and replacing it with terms like rotator cuff and subacromial pain syndrome, as shoulder pain is much more complex. Some authors are even pushing against these labels. I particularly like this statement by Cools and Missioner, saying tendon people find tendon-related causes for shoulder pain. Scapular people find scapular-related shoulder dysfunction. Ultrasound people find abnormalities in the tendon or subacromial space, and so forth. We should acknowledge that non-traumatic shoulder pain is multifactorial. This video is not directed at shoulder pain, but rather to understand shoulder mobility and flexibility, which are not the same as pain. It is worth noting, however, that there is some overlap between effective treatment of shoulder pain and shoulder function. We too should take a multifactorial approach. Remember that impingement we just created by limiting our scapula's ability to move, disturbing how our arm and scapula move together, that scapulohumeral rhythm, limited our range of motion. Essentially, your shoulder flexibility might not even be a stretching issue at all. It could be due to other factors, such as poor scapular function. Now, the scapula is an interesting bone. It does not sit at a joint against cartilage like most joints, but instead is known as a floating joint as it glides across our upper back. This means it can elevate, depress, protract, retract, upwardly rotate, downwardly rotate, and for those with finer control, even tilt. These motions are created by force couples between our muscles. A force couple is like turning the wheel in a car. To turn right, we move the right hand down and the left hand up. Together, these create a rotational force, while the muscles around the scapula do the same. For example, that upward rotation, which we need to lift our arms overhead, is created by our upper traps, lower traps, and serratus anterior. These muscles must work together to create the proper motion. If one of these muscles is too weak, our scapular risks getting pulled out of line and could potentially result in injury. So our body is smart. It can limit both your strength and flexibility to try and prevent an injury like this from happening. Imbalanced strength between force couples leads to an unstable joint, which activates your body's protective mechanism, leading to reduced neural output for strength and a limit on your flexibility. Most commonly, in the case of upwardly rotating the scapula, it will be the lower traps or serratus anterior muscles that will need strengthening to balance the force couples and unlock your strength and flexibility. There are many force couple groups. We can improve these motions through normal strength training or isolate them and target specific motions. But rather than adding everything to your program or guessing which muscles in a force couple you need to work on at random, I like to assess properly and target the training to what is actually needed. Otherwise, if you target the wrong muscle in the force couple, you could actually exacerbate the problem. Inspired by the work of two of my mentors, Olympic strength coach Charles Poliquin and Carlos Castro, I've collected data on force couple performance and created my own version of a force couple testing calculator that focuses more on range of motion. By testing a few different force couple tests, we can input the results into our custom calculator. This allows us to make a decent estimate of your strength and not only assess whether you have imbalance, but which motion it's affecting. This way you don't need to waste time training something you're already good at and can instead focus on where you need it most. If your upper traps and serratus anterior are strong, but your lower traps are too weak, then you now know you should focus on lower trap raises and not waste your time with anything else. This is exactly what happened to a student of mine, Tim. His shoulder range was limited. He's a strong guy, but during his assessment we discovered his lower traps were so weak he struggled to lift just 2 kilos in a lower trap raise. We then took his strength all the way up to lifting 10 kilos for reps with an even greater range of motion than before, and this was the result. Not only did he gain a significant range of motion, but by fixing the force couple, we allowed his body to properly express its strength potential, and he got his first handstand motion. This force couple concept also works for the other motions of the scapula, and so does our force couple calculator. We assess the strength ratios and look for imbalances in motions caused by the lower traps, rhomboids and mid-traps, rear delts, external rotators, which we'll talk more about later in this video, and more. This is where exercises like the YTWs come from. However, I don't like these exercises where people use the same weight and complete their YTWs in a circle. They're different motions and muscle groups. Instead, we target the movement that actually needs it and train in a way that allows us to properly track progress over time. I prefer exercises with dumbbells and cables over using bands, rings, or TRXs because you can train single arm and gradually increase the weight to know that your program is actually working. Because of this, our students in the mobility and flexibility toolkit are experiencing better results, finding out where they are weaker than they imagined and need to focus, and what can be scaled back to maintenance level. Whether it's identifying right-left imbalances or discovering where upper body injuries may have come from, the force couple calculator in the mobility and flexibility toolkit is another tool to really individualize and save time by targeting the training specifically to you. If you don't have access to the calculator, you can test your range, warm up a muscle of a force couple, and then retest your range. Another alternative is to watch how you move. However, this takes a fair bit of skill to develop the eye for spotting poor movement patterns. Because we're interested in range of motion here, the trick is to orientate these exercises so that the most leverage, and therefore the big forces, are experienced in the end range of motion. A more horizontal body position will modify your exercises like lower trap raises, power raises, and external rotations to have higher transfer, active flexibility, and range of motion. You'll notice I use a range of angles, but for active flexibility, horizontal is where the magic happens. Remember how the lats, pecs, subscap, and teres major are all internal rotators. They want to turn your shoulders in. Well, there's only a small group of external rotators that counteract them and turn your arm out. Rounded, internally rotated shoulders are a symptom of an imbalance. One way of addressing this is through strengthening those external rotators, like the infraspinatus and teres minor. Like strengthening the force couples, I prefer dumbbells and cables over bands, as you can gradually add weight and make sure you're actually improving over time. You may have heard of your rotator cuff before as an important part of shoulder function. The rotator cuff is a group of 4 muscles, including 2 of the external rotators we just mentioned, alongside the subscapularis and supraspinatus. Essentially, they work together to keep the head of the humerus into its ball and socket joint. Every time you do something with your arms, your rotator cuff activates to keep your arm in its joint. Some types of shoulder range of motion restrictions are a result of weak rotator cuffs. A weak rotator cuff can lead to the arm not being set properly, which closes that gap and can cause a similar block in your shoulder, limiting your range of motion. Strengthening your rotator cuff can be thought of as tightening a screw. A strong rotator cuff increases your capacity to keep your arm in its place, and in turn, keep your body feeling healthy and mobile. Not only does this help with your range of motion, but rotator cuff training can also make you stronger everywhere else. Keeping your arms set properly allows your body to lift and push harder, much like the scapular force couples we talked about earlier in this video. So do yourself a favor, especially if you're an athlete in an overhead sport, and take a look into proper rotator cuff strengthening. These blocks to your range of motion can also occur when we lose that scapulohumeral rhythm, where the scapula and arm move together. If the scapula can't keep up, such as from a weak link in a force couple, and the arm keeps moving, it can close that gap and create a limiting your range of motion. So here we can see the importance of proper testing of these muscles. It's through rotator cuff training that we can tighten that screw, and by refining the scapulohumeral rhythm through the force couple, that we keep the scapula gliding well, allowing you to access greater ranges of motion. There are also individual differences in bone structure. The acromion process can come in different shapes. However, a more extreme curve can lend itself to a higher probability of impingement, although the evidence is somewhat conflicting between scan types and classifications. Despite this, Dr. John Kurtz, simulated hanging from a bar in an MRI scanner, claimed the overall shape isn't necessarily permanent. What he found is that when you hang your body weight from humerus or upper arm presses up against the process. Not only does it suggest that there's an argument for a fixed shoulder joint, but also a mechanism, assuming enough exposure, for restructuring the acromion into a more open position. One argument is that deckers having their arms by our side when the shoulder process hanging, brachiating, which basically means swinging, and reposing. There is limited research on this exact phenomenon. However, the effectiveness of hanging can't be done. Our evolution from apes comes with shoulders that are capable of hanging and swinging through treatment. Like most things, you either use it or lose it. Hanging also stimulates the rotator cuff to keep everything in its place. It stretches out those muscles we talked about earlier and can be used to teach your body how to move your scapula properly. Hanging can be done passively, like a dead hang, sit down and let your shoulders come over ears, or actively where you lift up, creating space between your shoulders and ears. Hanging can start with the feet on the ground and progress all the way to one-on-one. There's a ton of variation here, such as different objects like thick bars, rings, hangboards, and so on. And progress can be made through swinging variations, grip switches, and more. Hanging work can not only help you improve your range of motion, but also build you a set of anti-fragile shoulders. Remember this photo I showed earlier? In the assessment, I noticed she had tight pec muscle, and then used the form of myofascial release followed by gua sha on her right arm. Here you can clearly see the gains on her right side after under 10 minutes of treatment. Once we then treated the other side, this is the result. 32 degrees increase in range on each arm in under 20 minutes. And the best part, we retested over a week later, she has kept over 80% of her new range. I've experienced an extreme variety of bodywork approaches from around the world in my search for new tools and better understanding, some more severe looking than others. During this pursuit, I've been fortunate to work with and learn from some incredible individuals. I researched into bodywork and soft tissue modalities, led me to Dr. Matthew Martin. He's worked with champions from the Olympics, CrossFit Games, and World's Strongest Man. He knows his stuff. Here's Matt's take on what soft tissue work can do for you.
The big thing that a lot of people miss in chronic injury is this process of soft tissue fibrosis that accompanies chronic injury and chronic decommission. The body has this response to those situations. And essentially, you'll undergo this process of progressive fibrosis of the connective tissue that surrounds your muscles, surrounds your joints. And what that does is essentially replaces normal, healthy collagen that's elastic and functions a bit like a rubber band with collagen that's denser, more rigid, weaker, more brittle, more like a kind of rubber. And where those changes happen represents resistance internally. And your movement system is powerfully organized around being a part of this resistance and motion. So you've got fibrotic scar tissue lurking somewhere in complex shoulder joint, then that's going to represent resistance to movement. And that will almost inevitably change the way the shoulder moves, organizes itself in a way that's going to be helpful. It'll either result in injury eventually, but definitely result in poorer function right now. And it's virtually always fixing, virtually always the situation can be, and surprisingly fast, weeks or months. Sometimes when the situation's right, literally within a session, you can make a huge impact. That's when people kind of go, wow.
I highly recommend finding someone with real experience like Dr. Matt to get soft tissue work. My experience with certain soft tissue treatments helped me, and it's one of the reasons my students progress so fast. It's surprisingly common to get these sorts of results in just a few minutes with my athlete, as I target where they need it and use a focused approach. Some of these treatment methods are relatively simple, safe once you have a basic understanding, which is why we teach an introduction into soft tissue work for those that don't have access to hands-on help from an expert. To improve your shoulder mobility and flexibility, I recommend you combine these tools we looked at. You should complete a full assessment to determine which muscles are tight, start by stretching where you need it most, and reassess the one's progress. Test your scapular force couples and rotator cuff, find out where you're currently lacking, and strength train the weaker family in a way that allows you to track progress every session. Then layer in hanging work, get your soft tissue treated, and don't underestimate exploring wider things like posture or neck work. Put these together and you should be well on your way to developing proper functional shoulders, full range of motion, and resilience to injury. If you're serious about changing your mobility and flexibility for the better, you should improve your understanding of the fundamentals. To train smart, you should know where to train on the passive to active spectrum, how speed changes in response to stretch, when to use stretching methods such as Rotator stretching, isometrics, and more, how often you should stretch and how stretchy you should feel. My team and I have put together a free 1-hour masterclass that will answer these fundamental questions and many more. Invest just 1 hour of your time, and I'm confident you won't look at stretching the same way again. To watch the free 1-hour masterclass, click the link in the description, enter your email, and the training will start straight away. See you there.
Jan Mohammed is a medical doctor from the Netherlands.
How did it go from showing me instructions to interviews?
With over 11 years of calisthenics experience, it's safe to say he has skin in the game and his knowledge runs deep. What calisthenics skills, movements, exercises we draw to and still enjoy training today?
You probably been doing
So
all like
I was initially a dancer. We did dance battles in school. I was like 13, and this guy did a backflip right during a dance battle. I was very naive at that time. I didn't know people could do that. I watched anime, saw Dragon Ball Z, but I didn't know people could actually hold handstands, do handstand push-ups, etc., do backflips. So once I saw him doing a backflip, I went online YouTube, checked tutorials, and on the recommended, I saw Geoff Kraft performing 90 degrees push-ups. You probably know the video because you were there at the time. There wasn't much calisthenics videos out there. He was doing 90 degrees push-ups. Dude, I looked at my screen like so incredibly inspired and confused. I didn't know this was a thing. So the moment I saw that, I told all my friends that I was going to be able to do that one day. And they laughed at me, of course, because I hadn't worked out a single day of my life. So I'm 14 years old now, never done a workout. Only, the school stuff. And I was very skinny. I was like 45 kilos. I was already my height. I didn't grow much after that. But I saw that, the 90 degrees push-up. I lost my mind. Then I saw the flange. Then I lost my mind even further.
We don't know what muscle knots are. We know they hurt a lot, and we know that if you find and push on them for a while, they tend to feel
I know
better.
exactly what they are.
But as to what's causing them,
That's what I'm doing right now.
we're not sure. So in today's video, with the help of the cadavers here in the lab, we're going to investigate the mysteries of muscle knots. All I know is that we're both going to need a massage after this one.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Let's
doing
do
right
this.
now.
First things first, I am sick, and I have been for the past week. And this weekend, I was even lucky enough to lose my voice almost entirely. It's finally starting to come back, so please don't judge me too harshly. By the end of this But to understand muscle loss tests, you first need to have a working definition as to what they are or what people think of them as. Now, muscle loss are more properly known as trigger. And trigger points are most commonly defined, although there are plenty of people who disagree with this definition, as being a discrete, focal, hyper-irritable spot that's located in a taut band of skeletal muscle. Now, that's a mouthful, but it actually tells you quite a bit. It's a single spot, but if you poke it, it tends to be highly irritable, and there's going to be muscle tension in the surrounding area. Now, trigger points also tend to come with organized preferred pain patterns. Now, you're probably familiar with these. The most probably recognizable one would be from a heart attack. So, you're suffering a heart attack, you may feel pain that goes up your neck, to your jaw, left arm, occasion, right arm, right? This is a radiating pain that is in a different location than the source of that pain, which is usually the heart. Well, trigger points come with their own preferred pain patterns, right? You poke them, they tend to radiate pain in that specific patterns. So the thing is, that definition is really more of a description than it is anything else. It doesn't tell you what causes them. So the primary issue is the lack of evidence and reproducible diagnostic criteria. It's difficult to do science when most of the evidence is subjective. And two expert manual therapists can't even find the same trigger point on the same individual. But it doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means we need to roll up our sleeves and do some good old-fashioned science. First, I want to say thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Yoga Body Teachers College. They specialize in science-based online certification, exercise, and even American Council on Education, making them one of the only schools in the world eligible for college credits. Yoga Body has put together a free report for you called How to Choose a Yoga Teacher Training Program. You can access and then change shape. And when they change shape, we call that a muscle contraction. This is wild. I want you to think about it. Out the surface of the muscle cell, and that will eventually lead to the release of calcium ions inside the muscle cell. Now, in the presence of calcium, the thin filaments, which are just protein accumulations, will actually bind to one another and then change shape. And when they change shape, we call that a muscle contraction. This is wild. I want you to think about this. This is happening hundreds of thousands to millions of times, depending on the movement that you're doing. It's so mind-boggling. But it's essential to understand this process if we're to really start understanding mystery trigger points. Now, if you recall, trigger points come with muscle tightness. The researchers have long wondered if there was a hypersecretion of acetylcholine at that neuromuscular junction that could create a maybe cramp of sorts that would then cause pressure and tension to be placed on nerve endings that would create painful sensations. What do you call that? Cramp a muscle. That would make a lot of sense. It's even pretty intuitive. So what researchers cleverly decided to do was inject Botox into muscle knots. I mean, this is brilliant. So Botox stands for botulinum toxin, and it's a neurotoxin that is produced by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. Now, what it does is it actually prevents acetylcholine from being released at that neuromuscular
I already saw.
junction. So when you can't release
I saw, and I understand.
You can't get calcium to be released inside the muscle cell. You paralyze the muscle. There's no muscle contraction. Now, there are plenty of legitimate medical uses for Botox, but most of the people probably recognize it as a cosmetic application to help limit wrinkles in the face.
Oh,
What does this?
God.
Paralyzing muscles in the face, and when the muscle paralyzed, you can't put tension on the skin, so the skin becomes relaxed. Muscles relax, and you just end up having a youthful looking area. So researchers, when they injected Botox into the muscle knots, well, what they saw was, sure enough, relaxed muscle, and they get paralyzed. But here's the interesting thing. The pain didn't go away. I mean, you would expect that when you inject a paralyzing agent into a muscle, that the pressure would be taken off the surrounding nociceptors, those pain-receiving neurons, except that didn't happen, which is really strange. Because when a massage therapist or anybody works this out,
It's tissue.
right, the pain and the tightness
tissue
will
on
go
tissue.
away. But here they are, paralyzing the actual muscle, and the tightness went away, but the pain didn't go away. That is really, really weird. You may be thinking, Justin, that really wasn't a mini cramp, right? A cramp, we'll actually do a video on cramp specifically at a future date. But a cramp essentially is when you don't have enough energy biochemical energy to stop contraction. So if you remember everything I just said, right? The calcium causes the proteins to contract. Well, in order to stop that contraction, you actually need something called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the energy that your body uses, and proteins use it in order to do their business. Well, in order to produce ATP, at least in sufficient quantities for us as a human being to have a fully functioning life, you need oxygen. This is why if you didn't have oxygen, you wouldn't be able to produce ATP kind of quantity to move into the cells. So in a cramp, what's happening is you just don't have enough ATP to stop the contraction. Well, many people have thought, well, what if a muscle knot is what we call an energy crisis, right? Let's say that you have bad posture. You're sitting, you're driving, you're sitting at your computer doing something along those lines. Well, you're putting a lot of tension on the muscles of the back. People theorize, well, what if that's putting tension on the capillaries? And when you put tension on the capillaries, that interferes with the delivery mechanism of oxygen to the muscle cells. And again, if you don't have a layer of oxygen, you can't make ATP. Some contraction. So, and if you can't stop the contraction, what that would do is that it creates more tightness. So that even if you relax, the area is still tight. And since it's still tight, that would mean you're still putting pressure on the capillary. You find yourself in this weird, vicious feedback system where you just can't stop the contraction. You're depriving this area of constant oxygen. I know that was pretty wordy, but that's what many people theorize is going on. Right? Energy crisis. This is an actual big cramp. Here's the weird part. Researchers have discovered that if you have a tight muscle, let's say that my anterior interbrachial muscles are really tight, and I poke it, what will happen is they will release that tension, and they will not be experiencing much pain. Also, when you poke a muscle, the antagonist muscles, so in this case would be my extensor muscles on my forearm, they also relax. So what you end up with is this floppy, flabby muscle, and it releases the pressure and pain. Right? Pressure releases pain, tightness. Well, that's what's weird, is because when you put pressure on a muscle knot, even though the pain will go away, not at first. Any of you who've ever had someone work out a muscle knot, it hurts the first time they touch it. Like, oh, yeah, that's the spot, right? And then you start going at it. Right? That shouldn't be the case. If it was an energy crisis, if it was an energy crisis, as soon as they put pressure, it should be like, it would melt away. We don't find that. In fact, you put pressure on a muscle, on a trigger point burst, pain increases as the tightness. You have to wait for it to release, which means that it's likely not an energy crisis. It's not a mini cramp. Nothing of that sort is going on, which only deepens the mystery. Now, the two hypotheses that I just discussed, right? The energy crisis as well as the hypersecretion of acetylcholine. These are only two of many different hypotheses surrounding the origin.
I think it's dehydrated muscle.
Some people out there
Works dehydrated muscle.
too much hyaluronic acid. Some say that it's a fascial connective tissues above the muscle are actually the source of the problem. Those are rich with doses of
Electrodes are hitting.
But if you talk to an acupuncturist, they're going to tell you that it's energetic, the accumulation needs to be released from that, right? There's no shortage of hypotheses out there. And I'm not here to tell you which one's right or wrong. But if you were to ask me, right, we're just sitting down, hanging out, Justin, what do you think causes this? I'm going to give you a very non-sexy answer, and that is I think it's actually going to be multiple things all kind of working together to create this nagging issue, right? You're going to have probably a metabolic issue, and that metabolic issue probably does irritate nociceptors inside of the fascia. But if you were to say, hey, what's the root cause? I think, and again, I think that it's actually originating in the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, possibly just one, not both. Right? Maybe there's some kind of signaling issue that's creating the hypersecretion of the semen. And the fact that you inject Botox, the reason why the pain doesn't go away is because pain is perceived inside of the brain. There's signaling mechanisms inside of the system. But I really don't know. I'm not doing the research myself.
It
This
is
just
the Like right now, I'm thinking of this
Truth
pain.
is, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter from a practical standpoint. Because what we do know is that if you poke it, they tend to go away. Even if that is really just a temporary fix, you still are going to experience relief. So I don't even know that most people care outside of me. Other nerds who are the ones who are like, I gotta find an answer. Because from a practical standpoint, it really doesn't matter that much. But if I've done my job today, hopefully you are at least a little more on my side. And you're probably like, we gotta figure this out. Gather your pitchforks and let's go conduct some awesome rageful science and figure out what on earth is going on. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully my voice isn't as bad as I think it is, but I'll see if I put all the footage together. Be sure to click the link in the description below. Get your free report from Yoga Body Teachers College on how to choose a yoga teaching certification program. As always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see you next week.
Alright. Time to go get a pancake. I'm gonna holler at you guys. Time to go be fat real quick. Make me nice 2 fat ass pancakes. I'm gonna talk to y'all later. Was that a lot of like? There was a lot like food there. I ain't gonna do that.